Já, ég get það ekki af því að ég einhverf og mín aðalfötlun félagsleg. Þannig ég skil stundum ekki alveg hvernig fólki líður og það er engin tól sem segja fyrir mig hvernig öðrum líður í kringum mig sem ég að tala við.
During my time at home, I have found that it is easier to do my homework because I don't have to get up as early that I can sleep in. However, it was hard to motivate and organize myself. So my grades stayed roughly the same. Spend a lot of time watching videos on YouTube and TikTok. It is also to love play video games and people all over the world. I have to be careful though that I am not to be distracted when it comes to the tests and the exams that I have to prepare for the school.
Io credo che internet mi abbia aiutato soprattutto nel conoscere le persone nel mondo, avere la possibilità di conoscere una persona che non potrò conoscere mai se non grazie ad internet. E di questo sono veramente molto contento. Sono molto contento di vivere in un'epoca in cui la comunicazione a distanza non è solo una possibilità, ma è una certezza.
Due to my hearing impairments, I had some difficulties keeping up in class. The video conferences use a sound frequency that is hard to hear sometimes. But one thing I do like is that I can work at my own pace. That is why I was able to get a lot of stuff done. I use my computer for homework, but also, of course, for playing video games with friends, which is a good way to stay connected, and you can also improve your English.
Ég mjög stolt að ég vera einhverf en það rosalega erfitt að segja stundum að maður sé einhverfur á netinu af því að fólk gerir svo mikið lítið manni fyrir það. Þannig ég vildi að ég geti sagt og bara verið opinber með það að ég sé einhverf.
I found lockdown quite boring because I couldn't meet up with my friends, and all I had to do with my time was either work on school or browse online. Sometimes my internet connection was bad and then I couldn't even do that. However, since I didn't have much to do, I had time to make some really cool memes. Moreover, you cannot deny that working from home, or differently said remote teaching, allows you to work at your own pace. This is perfect.
Ég held að það þurfi meira umburðarlyndi. Ég held að það þurfi að fræða fólk og kenna fólki hvernig á að koma fram við okkur og koma fram við okkur eins og við séum manneskjur.
Good morning, colleagues, and a huge welcome to the Safer Internet Forum 2020. I just want to say a couple of important things before I give some official words of welcome, and that is, first of all, that we have closed captioning on the session this morning. There'll be a button at the bottom of the toolbar on your screen, and you can toggle that to switch on the closed captioning. There'll also be some information shared in the chat box that will give you other sort of functionality on that. Also, I hope you can all see as well that we have sign language interpretation, and so again that will be pinned to your screen, so you'll always be able to access that if you need it. So, ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to the Safer Internet Forum. I think that for many of us, the Safer Internet Forum has become a key international conference that we look forward to at this time every year. The European Union, I think, has played a crucial role in promoting a safer and better internet for over 2 decades now, through a range of legal measures, funding programs, and self-regulatory initiatives. We often talk about the risks of being online, but of course it's really important to focus on the benefits too. And the European Commission's digital strategy is seeking to ensure that everyone is able to contribute to and benefit from the digital economy and society. I think we're probably all aware that different groups of people are able to benefit from the opportunities that the internet offers at different levels, but it is not a level playing field at the moment. And the forum this year will look at some of the challenges for children and young people with disabilities, but also the possible solutions. And we're going to be hearing from experts, from industry, from educators, but I think most importantly from children and young people themselves. So the title of the forum this year is Digital Disadvantage, Children with Disabilities Views and Experiences of the Digital Environment. And you will have seen just before we started some of the inspirational young people who have already shared their experiences with us, and we'll be hearing a lot more from them later on. So it's wonderful to see so many people attending today, and you're all really, really welcome. We've got colleagues here from across the world representing a range of different stakeholder groups. And I think it says something about the importance of the issue that we'll be discussing, that we've actually got over 650 people registered for the event across the week from over 65 different countries. And I say this week as the Safer Internet Forum is taking place over 4 days. So we started yesterday hearing from the BIC Youth Panel about some of the work that they've been doing alongside colleagues from industry as part of the BIC Youth Pledge. And the Youth Panel also met last week for a couple of days and shared some wonderful presentations and videos on a range of issues, including mental health and disabilities, the future of the internet, and teacher education. That session was recorded, and I really recommend having a look when you have a moment, because what they said was truly inspirational. There's just a few housekeeping rules to remind you of before we start. We're using a Zoom webinar to accommodate the numbers of people that we have. If you want to ask questions, hopefully at the bottom you can see a Q&A box, which we will monitor throughout the various sessions. And you can also use the chat facility to start discussions and share your thoughts and ideas. And it's wonderful to see all of the comments going up, greeting everybody from all corners of the world. So we'd like to know who's actually here today, and we've prepared a really quick poll where you'll be able to tell us about your role and who you represent. So we're going to launch the poll now. Hopefully you can see it on the screen, and if you can just quickly select the role that best describes you and what you do, that would be great. I'll just give people a moment to do that. It obviously takes some time. We have 150 people in the session just now, which is great, and you're all really welcome. So I can see that the Safer Internet Centres are well represented, which is great and which is what we would expect, but we have colleagues from government. Great that we have colleagues from schools, quite a few from industry as well, academic institutions, NGOs, colleagues from the European institutions. And great that some of our youth panelists have been able to join us as well. And equally parents. So you are all really, really welcome, and thank you so much for being here today, and we hope that it will be a really useful session. So that's enough from me for now. It gives me huge pleasure to hand over to Mr. Khalil Rouhana, who is the Deputy Director General of DG Connect at the European Commission. He will give some opening remarks. So Khalil, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today for the opening of this week. And let me start by thanking the organizers for this event, which is now becoming the normal event with the pandemic online. As you see, things have changed since the last year's Safer Internet Forum in Brussels, and many things have changed. Of course, not only what happened on the EU side with the change of commission and commissioners, but as you know, this pandemic and that we're living through today, and that I hope that it will be soon behind us. What we have seen from the COVID crisis is that digital has become now an essential part of our lives. We knew it, but it's now confirmed, and it's even the pandemic has taught us that we can do more with digital for the future. We can do more, not only in terms of communication and new working modes as we currently do, but we can do more also to address our key societal challenges. It has taught us that we're just at the beginning of really exploiting what digital can do to help us address crises like the one we've seen. And it has helped us also understand that we can have a major contribution from digital to address our green challenge by avoiding unnecessary mobility, unnecessary transport, while helping us also, of course, keeping physical contacts when necessary and when needed. It has also taught us that we're not always equal in front of digital. We saw that we wanted to have digital used across schools all across Europe. We discovered that not everyone can use the digital tools in the same way. And therefore, we have had us a lot of challenges in order to make sure that this digital transformation that is now shaping up is done in a way that preserves our values, preserves our democratic processes, but also in a way that it is inclusive and brings its benefits to the whole society, and to make sure that our economy is prosper and with benefits to all our citizens. This is the way we see the digital transformation in Europe. And that's why this digital transformation and the green transition are the two top priorities for the EU today. And we need to make sure that this, what we call twin transition, is shaped. It's not something that we only need to cope with. It's something that we shape in a way that it is in line with our aspirations and, as I mentioned, as inclusive as possible. We know that we have work to do, and I'm very glad that today we're gathered in order to understand even more what we need to do to make sure that this inclusiveness is at the heart of our digital transformation policy. The Union has confirmed, the EU as a whole, not only the EU institutions, but also the member states, the European Parliament, and I know that's happening also at national level systematically, has confirmed what I just said of the prioritization of the digital transformation for Europe, and as a transformation that we need to shape to fit the aspiration of our citizens. And if you look at our recovery plans, digital prioritized, there has been an agreement between Council and Parliament to invest at least 20% of the budgets that are dedicated to recovery throughout the Union. This is about the 675 billion euros that will be dedicated to the recovery plans, or we call Next Generation EU. 20% should be dedicated to digital investment and digital, which illustrates the importance that we're putting on this transformation. But we need to make sure that these investments, as I mentioned, are also done in a way that guarantees the inclusiveness of this transformation and the benefits are brought to everyone. We know today that 100 million people in the EU suffer from disabilities that might prevent them from making the full benefit of digital transformation. This is something that we need absolutely to address. We know that when it comes to children, there are 15 million children in the EU with just special educational needs that cannot be served with normal digital tools always. So we need to make sure that we bring the digital tools and we make them accessible to all our children, just if I take the educational purposes. And this is essential, as we know. This is something that we cannot live with, so we have to address it. And our commission, our president, the president of the commission, Mrs. von der Leyen, indeed insisted and highlighted that this digital decade that we call, that is ahead of us, that we wanted to be a success for Europe. This digital decade should not leave anyone behind and should benefit everyone across the Union. So this is why we're here today, and this is what as I mentioned, I'm glad that we gathered in order to understand and get a better insight of what needs to be done to make that a reality. And to make that the digital world an inclusive world for our children and young people, and making the online life and the digital life disability neutral. And I'm really pleased to see that in the forum today we have industry players, non-profit and civil society organizations, as well as safer internet centers, that all together we can think about innovative solutions to make sure that this inclusiveness is materialized, and that the digital use in all sectors, from education to health to public administration to our normal working environment, is happening with the highest inclusiveness. And when it comes to children, of course, that it is done in the safest way and the most inclusive way. And I'm glad that we're addressing the safer internet this year through the inclusiveness angle. It is so essential. Okay, so it's also important that following the slogan "Nothing about us without us," that the children and young people with disabilities themselves are with us, and they hold the most valuable information that we need in order to be able to serve them. And I really welcome the session today with young people discussing the barriers and opportunities of the digital sphere. What are we doing from the EU side? And first, let me tell you that as we do in the Safer Internet Forum, and I've attended some of this because I was director responsible for digital content almost a decade ago. And I attended this, and I could tell you that we are here to listen. So the messages that you want to send us are extremely important. So please do not hesitate. We need to make sure that what we design as policies fit the needs of our society, fit the needs of our children, fit the needs of our teachers, fits the needs of our parents, and fit the needs, of course, of our children with disabilities. We're here for that, so please do not hesitate. When the current commission took place almost a year ago, it set making Europe fit for the digital age a priority, as I said, and I'm glad to repeat it as well, with the willingness not to cope with the digital transformation as if it's going to happen, or what we need to be is reactive to it. No, with the goodwill to shape it so it fits the needs of our citizens. And I hope that I repeated enough to express to you the way we see our role and the union role in the digital transformation. Europe has its own way, and we need to make sure that we have all the tools that enable us to make that transformation along these ways, respecting our citizens' wish and aspirations. And that starts with getting the investments in the technology itself. If we want to shape it, we need to know how to shape it. We need to know the technology. We need to have the industry behind it in Europe that can help us shape this technology. That's a key part of our policy instruments, investing in reinforcing our technology industrial capacities, and within that investment, ensure that the inclusiveness, that our ethical principles, principles, our fundamental rights are respected. So that's essentially a key part of the investments that we would do. But we need also to adapt our legal framework to make sure that it is shaped in a way that enable us to achieve our goals with the digital transformation. And we have put a set of initiatives, regulatory initiatives, to adapt our regulatory framework, including on ethical and legal issues, for example, for artificial intelligence, on data sharing, to make sure that we use data to address our big societal challenges, as we saw how important it is for the pandemic. And also in the way that the wealth could be generated in Europe in a fair and transparent way for the future. But we also they made sure that what we claim as investment needed are there, and hence the 20% that I mentioned. It's about 135 billion euros that the member states have agreed to invest in digital in the next two years to make that digital transformation in line with our aspirations. And when it comes to the inclusiveness issue, and you could see it across all the priority areas for investments or for regulation, as I mentioned before. We want to make sure that wherever you go in Europe, you have access to broadband services, and that schools, public spaces, households in all regions have this access. It's essential if we want what we have learned from our new ways of learning, our ways of transforming our educational system through digital. If we wanted to make it happen, we need this best connection, best connectivity to be present all across Europe. We're also focusing on digital skills for children and children's rights. They feature in the Commission's agenda this year, illustrating the Commission's strong political support and commitment to child protection and empowerment. We are working on a comprehensive strategy on the rights of the child, including digital rights that will be available in spring 2021. And digital rights will be an important part, including digital rights for everyone and the need to have digital disability neutral for the future. In the meantime, on the protection side, in July, the Commission adopted a new strategy for a more effective fight against child abuse, of which you will hear more on Friday morning in a dedicated session organized by InHope. On the empowerment side, in September, an adapted digital education plan was also proposed by the Commission. And in addition, we're working now, as I mentioned, on the adaptation of our legal framework for the digital transformation. And part of it will be a Digital Services Act. This is a modernization of our e-commerce directive. And this is due to be adopted in the coming days, I would say. It will affect children because it aims to harmonize responsibilities across the EU for controlling illegal content while preserving freedom of expression, of course, and to ensure that responsible and innovative digital companies can prosper, that can guarantee these rights and guarantee a safe environment for children online. But in order to, we have, as I said, we have the adaptation of the current regulatory framework, but we also know that in this area, soft law is very important. And I know this because it was I was at the launch of the self-regulatory framework on the safety of our children online. And I know how important that is to make sure that all actors, mainly industry, is aware and involved with us in making sure that the online environment is safe for our children. And that's that's the self-regulatory industry process, what we call the Alliance to Better Protect Minors Online. Yesterday, we witnessed some intermediate results of the cooperation between the Alliance and young people on the Better Internet for Kids Youth Pledge, which was on child-friendly terms and conditions. I can only encourage industry to continue this work and step up their efforts even more. Today, we are focusing on children with special needs, how important this is, as I mentioned. I would remind you that as from this September, all websites of public service bodies in the EU at national, regional, or local level have to be fully accessible for people with disabilities. This is an important milestone in mainstreaming accessibility thanks to the Web Accessibility Directive. This inclusion of people with disabilities and the access for all to essential services, including digital communication and equal opportunities, are today enshrined in the European Pillar of Social Rights and in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. We must do our utmost to ensure that these rights are respected and any digital obstacles are removed. The Commission's European Strategy for a Better Internet for Children will also stay up to date and reflect coherently what is currently happening around children's rights and child protection at EU level. It needs also to respond to the digital transformation, which is advancing almost at the speed of light, as I said. In this work, we rely, as always, on the valuable cooperation with member states, industry, and civil society actors. In fact, we rely on you. On Friday afternoon, in a dedicated session, you will hear the tremendous progress of the implementation of the strategy for a better internet for children at national level and in a global perspective. Altogether, we have very exciting discussions ahead of us this week, together food for thought for future action. And I leave you now with the recent commitment of our Commissioner Thierry Breton, who mentioned that we have a common goal. Everyone, including persons with disabilities, must be able to benefit from the technology. It is really a key part of our European way of addressing the digital transformation and of shaping this digital transformation for the benefits of all our citizens. And with that, I wish you an inspiring, safer Internet Forum 2020. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Khalil, for those really inspiring remarks. There's a lot for us to think about, as you say, as we start our discussions over the next few days. And I think it's so positive to hear that inclusiveness is at the heart of digital transformation for the European Commission. That idea of, digital rights for everyone and no one left behind, I think is such a positive commitment from the European Commission. So thank you so much for those welcome remarks. It gives me really great pleasure now to introduce our keynote speaker for this morning. So Professor Laura Lundy. Laura is a Professor of Education Law and Children's Rights at Queen's University in Belfast. And she developed the Lundy model of children's participation, which I know she's going to be talking about during the presentation. But she was also the co-author of a report that was published last year in 2019, which looked at children with disabilities in the digital environment. Some of you may have been at the session yesterday when June Lowry Kingston from the European Commission opened the session with young people. And one of the things she said was that active participation by young people in public debate is crucial. And she said we need to consult their views. They have a uniquely valuable point of view. Their voice matters, and we should never ignore it. I can't think of anyone better to help us to address these issues in a meaningful way than our keynote speaker, Laura. And so, without any further ado, Laura, we're delighted that you can join us. You're really welcome, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Carl. Thank you for the invitation to the forum. I'm very glad to be here. Today, I'm presenting on behalf of my centre and the work that we did, and also on behalf of the Council of Europe, who commissioned the research that I'm going to speak about. The Deputy Director General mentioned that the issue of children's rights, and that is my own background, as Carla said. I want to also pay acknowledgement to the European Commission, and I think they have been at the forefront in Europe of promoting not just children's rights, but also inclusion of people with disabilities, including children with disabilities. I'm not going to say a lot about the rights themselves. What I do want to say is, while your focus primarily is on safety and protection from harm, From a rights perspective, we always look at rights in an integrated way. You can't just look at one. We say that rights are indivisible and interdependent. So when you look at the right to protection from harm, you've got also to look at things like the child's right to be heard or the child's best interest as a primary consideration. But I've put non-discrimination front and center for this presentation. The right not to be discriminated against is not a standalone right for children with disabilities. It attaches to all their other rights. So a child has a right not to be discriminated against in terms of being protected from harm or education or play. And that's crucial, I think, to the research that we've been doing. So children's rights and the digital environment has become an international children's rights priority. We know that the Council of Europe, for instance, has had it as one of the pillars of its last strategy, and it will have it as a pillar of its own strategy. And we've also heard from the Deputy Director General about the attention given to that in the European Commission. It's also going to be a focus of the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child's next general comment, which will be on children's rights in the digital environment. And the early draft of that shows that they're paying attention to children with disabilities and children with other vulnerabilities. The Council of Europe has a recommendation on, from its Committee of Ministers about respecting and protecting and fulfilling rights in the digital environment. And that again specifically says that we need to pay specific attention to children with disabilities in that. And as part of that, they have a very nice child-friendly version of this recommendation for children. I was part of the group that drafted that along with children and young people. But leaving all that background aside, this is the main part of my talk. There's been a lot of consultation with children around the digital environment, but what has been missing to date quite often in those consultations and discussion is attention to the views and experiences of children with disabilities from children with disabilities. So what I'm going to do in my talk is I'm going to talk to you about our study, then I'm going to tell you something of the children's experiences, then I'm going to tell you what children want governments and others, industry, society, teachers, schools to do, and then we're going to talk about how we can ensure that children are involved in these conversations. So starting with the study, it's called 2 Clicks Forward and 1 Click Back. And we chose that really deliberately with the children and young people because what is really clear for children with disabilities that we spoke to is that the digital environment has opened up all sorts of possibilities. It has been a game changer for many children. And even in their short lives, they've seen it change and improve, day on day, year on year, their accessibility to things that are really important to them, like play, leisure, education, has improved. But there's also 1 click back. And actually, as new spaces get created for all of us, it becomes sometimes very challenging for children with disabilities to share and engage in those spaces, either at all or in the same way as children who do not have disabilities. So our study was conducted in 6 countries, and these were our partners across the other 5, Belgium, Germany, Moldova, Portugal, and Turkey. And we're really grateful to them because this way we were able to access children and young people, not just with very different disabilities, but in very different social contexts. Our methodology is unique to our centre. It's a children's rights-based methodology. And what this means is that whenever we're conducting research of any sort on children, we always do it with children. We always create advisory groups of children who are representative of the children that we're going to work with. And then they help us decide what we're going to ask and how we're going to ask it, and then what it means. And these are just some of the children that we worked with 4 different groups. That was a good practical way. And you can see those groups on the slide. We managed to get some of them together last year at a conference that happened to be in Belfast. It was the European Network of Ombudsmen for Children. And you can see, I want to name some of our advisors because that's really important to them. But working along the front row, we have Maeve, and then Leah, and Kieran, and Cormac. Maeve and Leah were from our group with physical disabilities. Cormac and Kieran were from our group with physical disability or intellectual impairments. You can then see Regina Jensdottir from the Council of Europe, Evie, who was from our group with intellectual impairments. Just behind her is Emma, who was for our group of children with hearing impairments. Then the Irish Children's Ombudsman, me, and my co-director, Brona Byrne. So that was our group. Only some of them, as you can see, but we managed to get them together for once last year, and that was very important to us, that they could talk to the Ombudsman for Children, Commissioners for Children of Europe, and put their perspective across. Our actual participants then, apart from our advisory group, we talked to 97 children across Europe about their experiences, and you can see they were boys and girls, but also very diverse types of disability. And of course, that's crucial. I'll come on to that. So that's the background. What I really want to focus on now are children's experiences, what they told us about what it's like to be a child with a disability in the digital environment. And our first theme in the research was just simply diversity. There is no one type of disability or child with disability, and it couldn't have been more obvious whenever we talk to children about the digital environment. You all know this universal symbol of disability of a wheelchair, and it's very, we all know immediately that's the symbol that tells us disability. And yet it so fails to capture the very diverse types of disability that people have and children have. And I really like the forum's logo because you can see that it's capturing much more of the diversity of disability that's up on the screen. But I want to say to you that here's something of the diversity. For one of our advisors who uses a wheelchair, his physical mobility, she said, this is exactly the same. I'm exactly the same as all the other kids. It's no different at all for me. I can access it. It's not an issue for me at all. But that wasn't the case for most other children. And even if we look at children with the same category of disability, if we look at a child, for instance, who is deaf, a child who uses sign language has a very different experience with the digital environment from a child who maybe is a lip reader. A child who is blind is very different from a child who has another type of visual impairment. They access the digital environment in very different ways. And that's why we need to not categorize them as one homogenous group, children with disabilities. We need to look at the specificities of that. Diversity is key. Our second theme in our research was about digital access, and we've already heard some of that today in the early presentations. One of the things that is clear is really this issue of resource. It was not the same across Europe. Children in Germany had much better access than children in Moldova. And we could see that, children in Moldova were saying, well, we don't actually have a computer in the school, or our JAWS program doesn't actually function and nobody's updated it. It also wasn't the same across language. And that was one of the things that struck us. Many of our children complained that they could get on to, for instance, children who wanted to use subtitles could get on and use YouTube. But for instance, it's always in English. And our Portuguese children, for instance, were telling us that they were going to Brazil to try to get more material that they could use because they couldn't get anything within the Portuguese context that they wanted. Digital access, our advisors were saying, I love this quotation from them, it was just so crucial to their lives. And as one of them said to us, if there was a power cut, the world would end. That would be it. Their lives would be over. They couldn't do everything they wanted to do because the electricity was so crucial to their digital access. And again, we've seen that COVID has exposed some of the issues around access. And I think that really is important that we think of this, how crucial it actually is to children to be able to access it if you have a disability in very different ways. Digital dividend, as I said at the start, this cannot be understated. How important how much children with disabilities have benefited from the major moves in the digital environment, in ways in which they can get access to education, the ways in which they can play, the ways in which they can socialize. These have been crucial. But they're not the same. The dividend is very different depending on the type of disability. So if you think of our child from Germany here saying a voice recognition program for him who has a motor difficulty has been transformative for him. It makes his life so much easier. For our child from Portugal, a lot of it is about the social side of things, that they can do so much more. You can see him saying that he's only 14 and he's saying that even in his life, things have got so much better. We also find that children with intellectual impairments spoke a lot about how important it was for them and how much their lives were improved by the digital environment. For instance, not having to read material. Lots of them love Alexa and Siri. They love to be able to ask questions and get spoken back to them rather than having to struggle with reading. But I also really love this quotation from one of our advisors, and it came up in Sina's quote at the start as well, about being able to communicate and express yourself and have your personality was actually easier for a lot of children whenever they're in the digital environment, when they're online. And this quote is from one of our young advisors who is deaf. She's a sign language user, and she was saying, I'm hilarious. She was hilarious. She was really funny. I'm really, really funny. And it's hard in conversation with my friends who don't speak sign language. But when I'm on WhatsApp, I'm amazing. I am so funny. And it's really enabled her to express her personality. Digital disadvantage, while there were many, many advantages, and we called it the digital dividends, the digital disadvantage again is really marked. And again, it's very diverse in the ways that it manifests itself for children with different types of disability. 2 examples from the study. So a child with a visual impairment telling us just the sheer photographing the work so she can enlarge it in class is A, a lot of effort, and B, it used up so much storage on her phone. And you're saying, like, you need a phone with loads of storage, which of course is expensive. Boy with a physical impairment, lots of the boys talked about gaming and the ways in which, in some ways it was brilliant, and in other ways they couldn't, because whenever boys are gaming together, they're often talking to each other. So again, if you are deaf and not communicating that way, it can be very difficult to keep up with your friends. This boy found it difficult because of the motor skills. From our advisory group, I think this was a sense, this young woman, Maeve, who you saw at the start, was saying that there's this sense, partly to do with Stephen Hawkins, that everything is completely improved for a person like her, because they can use, you know, eye recognition technology and the movement technology. And she was saying, it just is so frustrating. I'm exhausted being me. And then this technology that everybody thinks is going to transform my life is just something else that tires me out and I don't want to use. And instead she uses her symbols to continue to communicate. Dealing with danger, I'm going to stop here because I know that is the main focus for most of you. And again, the experience, there's not one experience. Many of the children talked about having dangerous experiences. It's not to say, we know from research that they do. And we know from research that there's an enhanced danger for children with disabilities, but it plays out very differently. So for instance, very consistently across our children with intellectual impairments, it was really obvious that they weren't online at all. Their parents were so worried about them that they really restricted their online engagement. Or, and I think this is neglected, that if the parents were letting them on, what they were doing was they weren't watching them. They were almost delegating this to brothers and sisters. Siblings were crucial in this. And actually, if we're going to have strategies about how we protect children with disabilities, I don't think we should always aim them at parents. We need to aim them at families more generally, and the brothers and sisters, because they end up with the task, because often the parents don't know how to get them on the YouTube video, so they watch it with their brother or sister. Second thing was always just that idea of overprotection, that they don't treat them the same, that they are overprotected, that the parents do generally worry. So even children with hearing impairments or whatever, although I'm taking you across to the quotation from our advisory group. This is from our deaf advisory group. And we were asking them about danger and what we should be asking other children who are deaf. And one of them said, you know, Laura, we are the safest kids on the planet. And I was like, are you sure? And she said, yes, because we are so warned. Everyone is so worried about us. Everyone tells us all the time. We get it in school, we get it at home, we get it from parents. I think we're safer than most kids because we're so worried about it, which is an interesting perspective on it. Another kind of key theme was many children saying, why do you treat us different? It's a dangerous environment for everyone. Just treat us the same, warn us the same way. Other children need these warnings as well. Next theme, it really is about digital disruption. And I don't think we expected to see this. There is a discourse around the digital environment which says that for children, that their virtual lives and their ordinary everyday lives are seamless. The virtual world and their ordinary world is seamless. That may be true for some other children. It is definitely not true for children with disabilities. It is not seamless. And we saw this in so many aspects of their lives. So they would say things like their phones are crucial to them and the features on their phones, but then they go to school and told they can't use their phone. Or there's fantastic technology in school, but they're not allowed to bring it home in case they break it. So they're using something maybe worse in school or worse at home, and they have to change whenever they move between these environments. They also have to move whenever they go out socially. So something they can do really easily in one social environment then becomes really inaccessible in another social environment. So their lives are digitally disrupted. And you can see that quotation from the boy from Portugal, which I really like. He talks about that. And then I love this Portuguese saying that quite often if he doesn't, have his phone or he's not allowed to use it, I stay there and I watch the ships. A really kind of nice way of showing he just misses out. He's an observer and not a participant. Decision making is our next theme. Again, right across our children with disability, we asked them about whether they're involved in decision making. And it was really good to hear that in many cases with parents, there was really good involvement with children and discussion with children about what they needed and what they could do, and parents really trying to facilitate them to meet their needs and desires, which is really good. In other contexts, particularly school, as you can see from this quotation from Belgium, they're not really asked what they need. And they talked a lot about a waste of resource. So the school goes and buys these particular programs for the computers because they've heard they're really good if you've got a visual impairment, or they're really good for other disabilities. And actually they're not the ones the children want, and they're not the ones the children use, and they never get a chance to try and say, this is what works for me. They're just given what is bought for them. And again, they'd lots to say to industry about how industry could come and talk to them. And if they talk to them, they would see what's amazing about particular apps or features or games, and then what could be improved. And that's kind of crucial. Okay, so what do they want? So what do children with disabilities want? They want adults who know how to support them. Lots of the children talked about the fact that they're meant to rely on adults to let them access, but the adults haven't a clue and they know much more. And this quote, you can see that from Belgium again, is the experts at school are not always the experts. Lots of these children have classroom assistants. And I love this quotation again from one of our advisory groups. And they said, she freaks when it's Friday. She was the classroom assistant, and Friday was the day they study information technology. And she freaks because she's clueless, you know, and so this person, so in many ways, the child becomes the expert, but we need people, teachers, other adults in whatever environment that children find themselves, who have the expertise to communicate and to use the tools that these children with disabilities are using. Second theme is not to stand out from peers. I mean, our group was generally older. It was 12 to 17, so they were adolescents. And you know this is crucial. It's crucial to all children of that age. And it's also, of course, crucial to children with disabilities that they're not made to look odd. And I think I like this again from Portugal, where one was saying they love it now that when you go into McDonald's that you can order on an iPad. So they're just the same with their friends, with their family. They're deciding what they're going to have. They're not having this difficulty of communicating with the person behind a counter, but they're making the point, why can't we have that in the school cafeteria, where it's really awkward for me as well, or when I go bowling, all of the types of activities that they do. And again, from our advisory group, one young woman saying that she's visually impaired and she has to carry an iPad around school. And she says that she's a young woman with albinism. So she says she's talked a lot about her hair and how her hair and her eyes and her skin make her look different. And then she says, then I've got an iPad. I'm odd enough looking without running around with an iPad. Why can't everybody be running around with an iPad so I don't look odd as well? Independence, again, the age group. The digital technology has the capacity to offer these children independence, but sometimes because of its inaccessibility to them, it does the opposite. It makes them more dependent at an age when they should be dependent. Lots of that discussion came up in the context of medical appointments and staff. You know, so at that age, they want to maybe go in and talk to a doctor on their own, not with their parent, but actually the technology is not being used by medical staff to enable them to do that. And again, this quotation is just one example. It's an example of, you know, having your name called in a board. If the board is not visually accessible, often they're very dark with red lettering, that they can't see that. So they need someone with them to tell them it's your appointment. They need someone with them when they go into the doctor. And a lot of it was about saying, the technology's there to make us independent. Let us have it and let other people use it. And finally, in terms of what they really want was crucially involvement, which I know is what a lot of you work on. And they had, you know, scores of ideas about, you know, how digital technology could be better for them, and really keen to share that, as many children with disabilities are if they were asked, and of course they should be asked. So you can see here just one example. There should be a law saying all websites should be accessible, and if you're not, you're going to get fined 500,000 euros, which will reinvest in the technology, which is, you know, an idea. Involvement, this quotation comes from one of our Children Are Deaf advisory group, and what she said, and I will never forget it, was, my most hated words are never mind. And the whole deaf advisory group immediately went wild with this. They all hate these words, never mind. If they don't catch something, you know, through the sign language interpretation or through lip reading, people say to them, never mind. it wasn't important. And she said, I do mind, I really mind. How do they know I don't mind? I need to know what it is before to find out if I do mind. We need to involve them. They're often excluded. So the last part of my talk then is, well, how do we involve children with disabilities in decision-making in the digital environment? The first point I want to make is that it's not really a how, it's a human rights obligation. It's a duty. Article 7.3 of the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities, a very specific provision, requires states, parties, governments to ensure that all children with disabilities have the right to express themselves and their views are given due weight. Not just in accordance with age and maturity, which applies to all children, but this is the crucial distinctive provision that it's on an equal basis with other children. Just think about that, on an equal basis with other children. And in order to make that happen, they have to be provided with disability and age appropriate assistance. So my own work in the Convention on the Rights of the Child's Sister provision, make the point, this is not the gift of adults. This is not your choice, whoever you are out there. This is the right of the child, and it's our obligation to make that happen. We don't choose when we can do it, and when we don't, we have to think how. My own work is about, a lot of it is around child and youth participation. I have a model of child participation, which I'm not going to speak to today. You can find other talks on that, but it is to say we know how to do this. And we need to create safe and, really importantly here, inclusive spaces where children can express themselves freely. We need to give them opportunities and to express themselves in a medium of their choice. Again, crucial for children with disabilities. More importantly, the obligation then goes to duty bearers. We need to have the right audience. We need to make sure their views get, as I'm doing today for my group, I'm making sure they get to people who have the potential to influence decision making, that they need to get to the people who have the power to affect change in their lives, and finally influence. They need to know what happened and they need to get a response about what happened, which is also really crucial. So something about children's expertise in their own lives. Children are not the only experts. There are many experts here in this conference today, but children have expertise in their own lives and they have unique expertise in their own lives. They're uniquely expert on their own feelings. Nobody else is expert on that. And they have expertise about how they experience the internet. And I want to kind of really emphasize to you, we have to talk to them. Adults don't understand what it's like to be a child. You know, it's not that, oh, I was a child or I have children. That's not it. Adults with disabilities do not understand what it's like to be a child with a disability. It is not the same to be a 20-year-old who's keen on LinkedIn or Tinder, to be a 12-year-old who's just discovering on Snapchat or Instagram or TikTok, you know, or games. It's a very, very different experiences. It's very different, as I hope I've got across to you today, for children with different types of disability. It's not the same for children with physical disabilities as it is for children with intellectual impairments. Not the same for girls and boys. A lot of the differences came about who's using what and what particular apps or devices. So the boys doing lots of gaming, not only, there are lots of girl gamers who were really frustrated as well, but lots of the girls were very worried about selfies and how they present themselves and how they look. You know, so we need to talk to that. And we also need to talk to children of different ages within the category of child. So that's my talk about what children think. If you will bear with me, I've been thinking a lot about this and I just wanted to take a moment. Of course, my background is law and human rights. I'm doing a lot of work at the minute and in the last 2 years really on child protection, which was not my area of expertise. It's child participation in education. And I want to sort of dispel what I think are some misunderstandings about children's rights that I hope will be helpful to you all going into the discussion. And the first of these, which is really common, is the best interest principle. So there's an obligation to ensure that a child's best interests are a primary consideration in all decisions affecting them. And what I see time and time again is that is equated with harm, that the child's best interest is to be safe. Now that is part of a child's best interest, but it is not the only thing that needs factored in. Other things, as I say in the second point here, is it needs to include their other rights, the right to be heard. It's crucial to protection that we listen to children. We can't protect children unless we talk to them about what the dangers are that they're facing and how they're navigating them and what they need to navigate them better. But also we can't shut children's access to the internet and digital environment down. we can't deny them their right to seek, receive, and impart information on the basis that it's outweighed by their right to be protected from harm. That needs really careful consideration when we take away a human right on the basis of another right. It must be necessary and it must be proportionate, not these blanket bans. Thirdly, it's in a child's best interest not to be discriminated against in the exercise of their other rights. It's not right if we have, again, the COVID has exposed this, we have children without disabilities being able to access all sorts of things currently in school and in leisure, and then we deny that to children just because they have a disability. We need to create the conditions where they're included too. It's their human right. And then finally, and this is a point that is not always really understood, and that is that whenever a child is exposed to harm, the human rights response to that from the state actors, business, industry, whoever, is not to immediately say you can't go in. It's not to shut it down. The immediate obligation is a positive obligation on the state and on government and others, not to keep the child safe, but to make the environment safe. That's the first thing. And that's why I'm really excited to be here for the rest of the day, because I know this is the work that you do. And this work is crucial. It's crucial for all children, but it's really, really important for children with disabilities. So that's my finishing. So just to emphasize 3 short points, that is, they're entitled to be involved in the decisions that affect them. Only they know what it's like to be them in the digital environment. We don't know, and we can't know, and we have to ask. Don't be afraid to ask children with disabilities. People are concerned, well, I wouldn't really know how to communicate with children at all, or children with disabilities, or people are put off because they think they can't do it. We all communicate all the time. Children are communicating all the time. Children with disabilities are communicating all the time. And if you don't know how to do it, do what we did and ask them. Ask them how they want you to communicate with them and how they want to communicate back. So that's me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present this work, and in particular the views and voices and experiences of those wonderful children who gave us their time. And I look forward to the rest of the day. Thank you.
Laura, thank you so much for, wow, you've covered such a lot there, and I think your words set the scene perfectly, really. I'm sure that there's thunderous applause in a virtual way coming from all corners of the world there. We've got almost 200 people on the call now, which is amazing. There were just a couple of things that were coming up in the chat as you spoke there, and there was one common theme actually, which I guess makes sense given that this is the Safer Internet Forum. And I think, first of all, we had a comment from a colleague, Peter Nickens from the Netherlands. I hope I've pronounced his name correctly. And he talked about a study that showed that children with intellectual impairments were afraid to talk about any online risks for the fear of technology being taken away. And as you said, Laura, I think it's one of the things that we're constantly trying to do as Safer Internet Centres, certainly, to say, it's not about banning, it's about education, it's about dialogue, it's about discussion.
That's a brilliant point. And it did come up with our group as well, that we don't tell our parents that things happened. Quite dangerous things happen, but I didn't want to tell them because they would stop me. So that is crucial. And again, I suppose a lot of the parenting education about keeping those conversations open. And quite often, again, the siblings point, we noticed when things like that happened, they went to the brother or sister on the basis that the brother and sister wouldn't tell the parents. So I think that area of siblings is really important for the children with intellectual disabilities if they have siblings.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think personally, I find that sometimes the headlines that we see in the media are really unhelpful as well, because they sort of talk about the most extreme things that can happen online, which, of course they have happened. But I think, you have to sort of think about probability versus possibility. The likelihood of those worst things happening is very small. I mean, I think the other point that was made as well, Laura, was that, very often we will consult with young people, we'll ask for their thoughts and views and opinions, but then actually, putting that into practice, what they say, it's a little bit complicated. So, we'll just sort of say, well, thanks very much, that's great, and then we move on. And the point was being made, certainly by Barbara and by Gareth, that, you can't just listen and then say, no, it's too difficult, so we'll not do it.
So that's a whole other talk of mine. That's what I normally talk about, and I'd love to talk to you about that sometime. That's the nature of the Lundy model, the audience and influence and response. And I've done a lot of work recently about how we create these critical junctures where we respond to children, and we respond in detail, because of course there's some things we can't do for children with disabilities, and it may be that it isn't safe, and it may be we don't have the resource. But they need that explained to them, and they need that conversation opening, because it might change. And often we just say, no, you can't, and we never go back on it. So I think it's really important we get children in this dialogue and that we give them, that we're realistic. I really don't like the term manage expectations. I think children with disabilities should have amazing expectations for everything they want, but I think we also need to be realistic about what's possible. So I think that again is a really important thing. And again, a lot of my work and the work of our centre is on that. And a lot of the work of the European Commission, which has done amazing work on child participation.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I think that's definitely something we need to get you back to talk to us about at some point in the future. And it's a lovely segue actually into what we'd like to do next, because just to sort of respond to what you said, Laura, I'm going to pass the floor to June Lowry Kingston, who I've already mentioned, and some of you will know she's the head of unit for accessibility, multilingualism, and safer internet. So combining some of the things that we're talking about. So I'd just like to pass across to June to sort of make a few remarks and to talk a little bit about what the Commission is doing.
Ellie, I'm going on the camera, okay? So thanks, Carl. Sorry, I'm just trying to start my video, and there we go. Oh, keep pressing the wrong button. I'm so sorry. There we go.
No worries.
First of all, huge thanks, Laura. I know we're a bit short for time, so what I'd really like to say is we're listening to you. I really want to continue this this cooperation. You've been a fantastic choice of keynote speaker this morning, and we also, as I think for those of you who were at the section with the young people yesterday, we really are committed to youth participation, and I think we really do want to listen to children of all ages, but also children with disability. This commission, as Khalil said, is genuinely committed to creating a Europe of equality. I think we have a really good chance now to get some differences being made because of the political commitment from the top, from the President herself. The fact that we have a Commissioner for Equality is also extremely useful in the sort of political landscape of getting support for that. And next year, as Khalil mentioned, we have two strategies coming through. Now, strategy isn't hard law. There is quite a lot of hard law already on issues of disability, but we have two strategies which I think really will set the tone and will set the expectations. One on the disability strategy for the next 10 years, and one on the rights of the child. And if I just quote a wee bit of the evaluation of the current strategy, and it says actions, because it touches on really what Laura was saying, I think, actions particularly in the area of accessibility, meaning digital accessibility, mostly focused on visible disabilities, the needs of persons with intellectual disabilities and within visible disabilities in general were taken into account to a much lesser extent. And these considerations also apply to children's rights, which were not adequately included in the strategy. So it's still being discussed, the text isn't there, but I think we can expect something by next spring in this new disability strategy, which should address these issues and really make it clear that there is diversity in disability, and also that children's rights really need to be embedded in that. So that's all I'll say for now, Carl. I'm happy to come back at the end if time permits, but really I want to hear from the children today.
Thank you so much. And I think, yeah, we look forward to hearing more about the disability strategy and sort of seeing that in the spring, as you say, and we will definitely be coming back to you, June, later on. So colleagues, you know, it's my real pleasure now to sort of launch the panel discussion that we're going to have. We've got a number of different stakeholders who are going to take part in this, and I will introduce most of them as they sort of come up to speak. But we're also going to be hearing from young people, and as June says, you know, this is the core of what we're doing, and this is the most important bit. We've got a number of young people who've made video testimonies for us, and we saw some of those at the beginning, and we're going to see some of those during this panel session. And I just want to tell you who we're going to be hearing from. So we had some young people from Austria, from the school centre Ungargas, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, and we've heard from Maya and Robin and Meris and Kabir and Amar and Berkant and Thomas. And as I say, if we haven't heard from them already, we will be hearing from them during the panel. We have two young people from Iceland. We have Aldis and we have Suna. We have Alessandro, who will be joining us from Italy, and from Portugal, we have João and Daniela. And the really good news from my point of view is that although João and Daniela have prepared some video testimonies, they're also actually with us here in person today. So Daniela, we're going to start with you, and I'm absolutely delighted that you're here. I want to thank you for preparing the video statement, and just before we come to you and sort of say a few things, we're actually going to play the video for everybody now.
Hi, my name is Daniel Mauricio. I am 25 years old and I live in Intercamento, Portugal. I am studying digital literacy in St. Lawrence Education School. My main learnings were I became more comfortable speaking with others and working in groups. I learned many IT skills using Word, PowerPoint, Excel, sending emails, browsing on web, and using social networking. During the quarantine, I also learned how to use Zoom for online classes. I enjoyed it a lot because I could see my teacher and colleagues. I think that my learnings are very important in my daily life. In my internship, I use my IT skills to perform the required activities. And sometimes I even help my mother with Facebook and using the computer.
Thank you so much, Daniela, for that video sort of introduction. And it's very clear that we can see that, you know, technology plays a key role in your life, and you're using it for a whole variety of different things. And you mentioned lots of the Microsoft products there as well, which I'm sure Cornelia, who represents Microsoft, will be very pleased to hear. Daniela, you mentioned social media. And I think you said that you helped your mum with Facebook. Is social media something that you use a lot? You know, which apps do you use? Do you find it easy to use? Would you like to say a little bit more to us about social media and what you do with it? And I should just say, colleagues, that Daniela is here with Maria, who is one of her lecturers from university. She mentioned the internship that she's part of, and we'll hear a bit more about that later on as well. An absolutely fantastic program at the university. But let me pass across to Daniela and Maria.
Okay. Hello to you all. It's a pleasure to be here with Daniela. And well, Daniela, would you mind to answer the question about social media and your life? So,
I use Facebook sometimes. My mother gets angry when I spend a lot of time on it.
I use Facebook.
I use Facebook to communicate with friends and family. I like to see their posts and photos.
So here you have the testimony of Daniela as a student in the Higher School of Education in Portugal, of the course, the unique course in Portugal in digital literacy and the labor market with a 2 years course. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Daniela, and thank you, Maria, as well. And I think that's something we can all relate to, Daniela. You know, you said that sometimes your mum gets furious because you're spending a lot of time online. And I think we all spend a little bit more time than perhaps we should. I think particularly, you know, at the moment with COVID-19, which we'll talk about more shortly, and lockdown, I think it's probably quite understandable. But it's such a good way, as you say, Daniela, to stay in touch with family and with friends and communicate with people who perhaps don't live with us. But thank you so much. I think you've opened up the panel there in an absolutely fantastic way. And what I'd like to do now is pass to João, who is also from Portugal. And again, we'll have a conversation with João, but he's prepared a sort of video testimony as well. And we'll just start with that before we come for some questions.
Hello, I am João. I am 18 years old and I'm from Portugal. I have glaucoma since I born. Technology is important during my life and school. When I came to school, I was 7 years old, and the technology that time was a pen, and almost anything else. It was very difficult to start. I had the magnifying glass TV, and I did my activities there.
João, what is a magnifying glass TV?
Really, it's a screen where down of the screen I put, for example, some book or some notebook, and I can read from the screen and write. And till my 14, I think, I was using just the magnifying glass TV. And then a really important thing happened when the computer came to my life, and when it came the possibility to use a computer. So I started to learn how to use it with the voice software. And from my basic school, I started to do some presentations with it, and search some things for school, and it was really important because...
Oh, João, just a question. You talk about that software that you use.
Yes.
What kind of software? What this?
It's a voice in the computer that reads me what is
the screen?
What written in the computer.
Okay, it's a screen reader. It reads everything. Okay, so you need a lot of time to learn how to use it. Yes.
I spent more than 1 year.
1 year, yeah. So you have to learn how to use the computer and the screen reader during 1 year. It's like learning how to read again. Yes.
Yes.
Huge thank you to João and Susana there, who was also on the video sort of discussing that with João. And João, you know, you mentioned that technology 11 years ago was a real pain. And I think probably everybody can agree with that. Some people would even perhaps say that technology hasn't really improved that much. I think we still get frustrated when things don't work and the screen freezes and so on. But hopefully we've sort of moved forward a bit. João, you mentioned there about, you know, the screen reader and things like that. And I know when I was talking to you the other week, you were talking about how sometimes, you know, people don't follow the rules. So the tech companies don't really follow the rules. And there are things that are in place, but if we don't sort of obey them and follow them, that causes real problems. And I wonder if you could perhaps say a little bit more about that.
Yes, good morning. Sometimes it's difficult to use some websites when I am only using the shortcuts and the screen reader, because I think the websites are not organized to the screen reader, like says us very well what is wrote there. So sometimes it's difficult.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, when you were saying to Susana there that, you know, you spent a whole year trying to sort of learn how to use all of this stuff, it must be very frustrating, I guess, if then people don't follow the rules and it's not accessible all of a sudden.
Yes, a little bit, because you are a lot of time trying to learn something which could be easier for you, and it could open for you new possibilities. And then I saw that sometimes it would not be it would not be really easy. Especially, as I said, in the websites, it's difficult to use the screen reader.
And Joao, I think there are lots of people today listening who actually create websites. You know, they're putting content up online, and I'm sure that they will be listening to what you're saying, because, you know, I think sometimes if we don't have the visual impairment, for example, it's very difficult to know what it's like. So I'm sure that people will, you know, really be thinking carefully about what they're doing moving forward. Joao, we're going to come back to you later on, if that's okay. We're going to.
Okay.
I think it's a really good opportunity, since we're talking about industry and, you know, perhaps the people who create the content, to pass across now to Cornelia Kutterer from Microsoft, and she'll talk a little bit about the work that they're doing in this space, and what is being done to make platforms, you know, more accessible and more inclusive. So, Cornelia, could I pass across to you now?
Okay, hello. Thanks for the introduction, and it was a real pleasure to hear Maria and Joao, and I think this their testimony is so important to companies also to understand what is needed. I'll start with a broader topic, and then I want to also give some personal experiences over the last couple of months in particular. And after that, I'll talk a little bit about my favorite project within Microsoft that in my mind provides huge opportunities. So the first thing I want to say is that since 2014, with our CEO, Satya Nadella, under his leadership, accessibility has become a core to Microsoft's mission to empower individuals and organizations to achieve more. What that really means is that we are trying to help everybody to do more with the technologies that we provide. And that has been a real culture shift, and really thinking from the start of engineering about all these aspects. And so accessibility has become really an important function and feature across Microsoft services and products. And it includes also not only building the technology for everybody, including people with disabilities. We're knowing that there is over 1 billion people in the world who have disabilities. We also want to have a workforce that represents the society overall. So our efforts are also to include people with disabilities. In this context, I wanted to mention that, you know, the COVID crisis, I think, has proven to be showing weaknesses, but also strength in how we can benefit and create new opportunities from accessible technology. In my own team, I have one person with disability, with a hearing disability, and he told me from his experience that, you know, using Microsoft Teams at home instead of being in a room with a lot of people has been a game changer for him, because suddenly everybody does speak into a microphone, and so he can hear every voice very clearly. And where this has been a little bit more difficult, he also uses real-time captions that is what Joao was explaining within Teams, but in real time, a voice a reader, so that he can sort of the other way around, he can read what people say at the same time. And these types of technologies, and I could testify, have helped him to be more active in conversations, and it has really helped him quite a bit. So we can really see through our own workforce and through testimonies like those we heard, that these technologies enable people to be and to create a more inclusive culture. We also do this through hackathons, so all our engineers coming together and really try to think about envision new ideas and how to improve technologies for people with disabilities. And this is how many of our technologies are actually graded, such as Seeing AI, or the Windows Eye Control and other learning tools that Microsoft has developed. My absolute favorite project, however, is Project Tokyo, and you can also search this on the internet if you type in Microsoft Project Tokyo. This is a project that uses AI, artificial intelligence technology, to help blind people and people with low vision to recognize and identify people. And what is so fascinating about the project is that it includes a young student, Theo. He's now 14 years old, that has been part of the project team in order to create the scenarios in which he really needs that support. So what we really did is using a HoloLens, which is a virtual technology, together with facial recognition technology, the AI-based technology, to enable him to identify his students around him. So we have augmented his ability basically to his class student colleagues. And he describes this, and I've been going through a workshop with him. It was fascinating how he has described this as a game changer also for him, because he now can also interact much easier with everybody because he sees them. The people have in that project have described that for blind people, I found that very amazing, and Joao, you might have this experience. People know him for so long, but he doesn't know the people because he can't see them, and that is a project that tries to address this in certain environments. At the same time, we're of course in this project also looking at issues around privacy, for example. But I personally think that is a project that just sees that sort of the sky is the limit, the imagination of what we can actually achieve when we bring people with the disabilities together with the engineering teams and envision creating the new innovative products. That's for me really where this is so exciting. And I would just commend the Commission to start with the young people to hear what they need, and so we are looking forward to really working with all of you to envision more and more innovative products to help and create the inclusive society that we want to live in.
Thank you so much. And I think that Project Tokyo just sounds so exciting, so fascinating, and of course so many opportunities. I love the fact that you say that the sky is the limit, and it's really good, I think, to hear that things are happening perhaps behind the scenes. But we've shared the link, June has shared the link to the Tokyo project, so I hope people will be able to go and have a look, and it will be great to hear Joao's view of that if he's able to sort of look into it a bit more as well. So thank you so much for that, Cornelia. I think, you know, we're here at the Safer Internet Forum, and, you know, it's really important that we talk about online safety. And Laura mentioned this perhaps in her opening sort of presentation. And we talked a little bit about, you know, the fact that parents think that restricting is the best way to keep children and young people safe. That bit, you know, we are so warned, we've heard it all before. And we have a couple of video testimonies here from some of the young people who will talk a little bit about, you know, online safety and what it means to them. And in a moment, we're going to hear from Suna and Aldis, and not in the video clip that you're going to hear, but that they also said, you know, we just don't have any online safety at all in school. It's not something that happens. We've never been told how to stay safe online. And equally, I was looking at a bit of research that came out only a month ago. And I just want to read you two quotes from young people in this research. I've been taught at school, but often not in a very effective way. It seemed to insult us or assume that we're dumb about being online. And this causes a bad attitude towards it, but the school teachers don't seem to have noticed. And then this one here. Yeah, they tell us every day about how to stay safe online, but the 2,000-year-old videos that they use don't work anymore or apply anymore. What school doesn't teach you is how to handle stress when you're online. So this is not painting a particularly wonderful picture at the moment. I know that the colleagues in the room from the Safer Internet Centres do an amazing job in terms of their education, but I'd like us to hear now from Suna and Aldis about what they think.
Ég er ekki í skóla, en mér átti rosalega skrítið að þurfa að tala alltaf við fólki gegnum netið af því ég skil ekki líkamstjáninguna. Það er rosalega erfitt að tala við einhvern ef maður skilur ekki hvernig þeim líður eða hvað er að segja, hvað þeim meina. En já, þér Aldís, finnst þér erfitt svona að nota eitthvað hjálp á netinu? Nei. Ok, það er gott.
Já.
So perhaps there are two slightly different points of view there. You know, Aldous saying, yeah, no, it's fine, it's not a problem. But you know, Suna clearly saying that, you know, when she can't see people, it's difficult to know how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and so on. And I also want to pass to Alessandro. We haven't heard from Alessandro yet. He's one of the students from Italy. And he talks about, you know, how he thinks young people with disabilities should be supported in terms of online safety, things that can go wrong online. So let's hear from Alessandro.
Sì, ci sono delle difficoltà per le persone affette da disabilità. Infatti credo che loro abbiano bisogno anche di una supervisione da parte di adulti e di persone competenti.
So again, you know, and thanks to Alessandro for those thoughts. I think, you know, feeling that people perhaps should be supervised by an adult or a competent individual. I think going back to what Laura said, that will not be the view of everybody. You know, we mustn't lump all of this together. And I think that came across very clearly. João, I don't know whether you're still there, but I just wondered whether we could ask you, you know, about your experience when you were in school. It'd be interesting to know whether online safety was taught, and equally, if it was, you know, did you think it was any good? You know, was the online safety that happened in school something that you felt was useful? I don't know if you're still there, João. Perhaps you're not at the moment, and perhaps we'll have to come back to you to ask you about that in a moment. Which
yes,
you're still there. Fantastic, fantastic.
About to be safe in the internet. In my school, teachers, I saw them very worried about it. They were every time explaining us what we should do and what we shouldn't do in the internet. They were talking about dangers sometimes of social networks and something like that.
And yeah, thank you, Joao. So clearly a very similar experience, talking about all of the things that can go wrong. Has that been the reality for you, though? I mean, when you're using the internet and social media, do you see these problems? Do you see these huge risks, or is it, I mean, is it usually a positive experience for you?
I feel safe now because I try to remember what teachers said, and if I know that if I follow their instructions or what they recommend us, I know that I will be more safe. So what I trying to do? To follow what teachers usually say about internet, then I know that I am safe there.
Thanks, Joao. I think the teachers who are all here and listening will be very pleased to hear that. I mean, because that's the ideal, I suppose, that, we give them messages and then people take them on board and apply them and remember them. I'm not wanting to put Laura on the spot here. She wasn't expecting me to come to her just at this particular point in time. But Laura, I just wondered, because you've obviously done such a lot of work with, children and young people. Was this an area that you talked about, that the sort of, because I think you did talk about those online safety messages. Why do we need something different? I'm just like everybody else, give me the message.
Yeah, no, I mean, so much of what they were saying, Maria and Joel, was echoing with what the other children and young people said. So I was just ticking away as they were speaking. But on the safety issue, yes, again, I think, the principle of inclusion is universalism, and I think it's just that not making them different. So yes, of course, all young people need educated about the dangers of the internet, and some of those dangers appear differently for certain children. And I think it's getting a package of material that is like that, as opposed to the response that we sometimes get to certain children with disabilities, which is the big shutdown. And I think that's crucial. So I think the work that is happening within the forum on that type of education for children themselves, parents, siblings again, teachers and the other adults is just really crucial. Let's open this space up, let's make it safe, and let's empower children to keep themselves safe. And I think that echoes with what was just said.
Thank you, Laura. And I'll do a little advert here for colleagues, because we have a deep dive tomorrow morning. We'll talk more about them at the end, but that, as Laura says, is going to look at sort of online safety resource creation for children and young people with, diverse disabilities. So I hope that it will be a start to sort of looking at the content that is available. What I'd like to move on to now is to talk about something that is, I think, always at the forefront of our mind at the moment, COVID-19. It's been a year like no other year, and we've already had references to the pandemic from various colleagues who've spoken. I think it's important to hear how it affected, children and young people. There were some comments made at the very beginning, I think, from Khalil, who talked about, the large numbers of young people who just did not have connectivity. And I think when schools closed, understandably, and online learning was sort of pushed, sort of to the forefront, it wasn't always accessible for everybody. It may be great if you have a laptop or, a sort of desktop computer, but perhaps it wasn't particularly suited to mobile devices. Perhaps it wasn't particularly suited to tablet devices. And equally, perhaps it wasn't particularly suited in every case to children and young people with a range of disabilities. So what we're going to do now, we're going to hear from quite a few of the young people. And we're going to start by hearing from Maya in Austria, who will talk a little bit about the impact that COVID-19 had on her.
When I was at home during lockdown, I was grateful to be able to go to class from my room, because it was easier to get around. Before, I had to worry about transporting my wheelchair from home to school. But I missed the direct interaction with my friends through students. When I'm online, I like to chat with my friends or watch YouTube tutorials. Last but not least, inclusion gets a new dimension with digitalization. That is good.
I think they're really wonderful words to hear that inclusion gets a new dimension with digitalization. Again, a thread that's been running through the things that we talked about. And I think great to hear from Maya that there's some very practical benefits. You know, she doesn't have to worry about getting a wheelchair, you know, in and out of classrooms and to and from school. But she also mentioned that idea of isolation, which, you know, it has been an issue for so many of us, I think, during the last few months. And we're going to hear from Robin now, who's from the same school in Austria, and he'll talk about how, you know, lockdown affected him.
For me, the most annoying thing about having school at home was that I felt quite isolated and therefore a bit depressed, and I wasn't allowed to leave the house, and that was a big problem and quite boring. But on the other hand, I finally have all of my tools and accommodation that I need available online. It wasn't the case before the lockdown, and the communication in class with the teachers works better for me now. The funniest thing that during homeschooling, the teachers come straight to your living room or even bedroom. I have to spend my time online with my friends and also watching YouTube videos. Yes, we have all become change makers.
Thanks to Robin for those comments there. And I think, again, it provided opportunities. It also brought challenges. And I'm going to play you another part of Joao's testimony now, because, you know, Joao talks a little bit about how lockdown affected him. And I think, again, has some really interesting and valuable observations. So we'll listen to him now.
The most important time was during the quarantine. Mm-hmm. When I had everything online, classes, and I also did writing tests online, and technology was important, and it was not so difficult because for me was normal to use the technology. I know some friends that they didn't know too much how to use it sometimes because it was not so usual for them.
Thanks for that, Joao. And Joao, I know you're still there, and perhaps you'd like to add something, but I think you make a really important point there. You know, you were already using a lot of this stuff, so it was easy for you. You didn't have to worry about it. And I think for a lot of adults probably in the room, that they had a very sharp learning curve where they had to suddenly learn how to use Zoom or Teams or Google Meet or whatever it might be. Is there anything you wanted to add about that?
It was not so difficult because, as I said, I use the technology very often. So I think it was easier for me than for my friends. But even if I'm saying that this is not so difficult and a little bit, I should say, easy, I want to go back to the classes as they were in the past. I mean, I think students, we cannot be so much more time having just online classes. I think we have to come back to schools and to universities again, because be in a room with the teachers, I think is the better for us. And the online classes, I think we don't learn so well as we did in the normal classes. So I hope that we can come back early to schools and to universities.
Yeah, thanks, Joao. I think everybody hopes that we will get back to, you know, some sort of normality soon. Certainly, it's a hope for 2021. And I think your last point there is interesting as well, that, you know, this is great and it's fantastic. I'm sitting looking at the chat here and there's conversations going on about, you know, the games that are really good and perhaps the games that aren't quite so good. And this is wonderful, but it's not the same. It's not the same as us all being there in Brussels or Luxembourg or Lisbon or wherever it might be. I'm going to give the final word on this sort of session about COVID-19 to Amar from Austria, who makes a really interesting point, and then we'll sort of get the view of somebody from an education ministry about this. So let's give the final word to Amar.
One negative thing during the lockdown is that my online classes did not have captions. Without caption, I find it difficult to follow along in class, but it wasn't all bad. Because if I didn't want to work on one day, I could make it up another day. Of course, I missed my friends, but there are positive and negative about each situation. When I'm doing my schoolwork, I like to watch YouTube videos about astronomy or play games online. Summing up, I want to say that inclusion has made a big step forward because of digitalization, but what cannot be denied are two things. Firstly, there are still a lot of teachers stuck in the analog world, and secondly, the Austrian school system has to adapt better to the new way of teaching and learning.
Wow. So yeah, teachers are stuck in the analog world. I'm going to ask Anna Maria in a moment to say what she thinks about that. And I know that Barbara and other colleagues from Austria who are listening in may have a view about the Austrian school system needing to update itself and so on. But Anna Maria, we're so delighted that you can join us today. Anna Maria is the State Secretary at the Ministry of Education in Serbia. And so, you know, would you like to sort of share some of your views, Anna Maria, about COVID, absolutely, and the impact on young people, but also some of what you're doing in Serbia to sort of support children and young people with specific disabilities?
Thank you very much, Carla. It is my utmost pleasure and honor to be speaking on behalf of the experiences that we had in Serbia during the COVID crisis in the springtime, when indeed, as State Secretary at the Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development, I was in charge of distance learning with a special emphasis on children with special educational needs. So the experience that I will be sharing is all the challenges and lessons learned that we had from this period. Since March to June, we had complete lockdown in Serbia, lockdown of primary schools, secondary schools, higher education institutions, and also preschools. And this is the time when we transferred onto distance learning on all levels. We had TV classes, recorded classes that were broadcast on national television channels, and also some online classes that were provided by teachers through several digital platforms like Microsoft Teams, Zoom, or Google Classroom, Skype, etc. So everybody tried to find their way in this digital world where we tried to provide the best possible education on all levels that possible. Also, because some of the children and some of the families did not have the necessary tools, we had solutions like working through Viber or Messenger or text messages as well. And we had one common online platform provided for all for free. The Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development provided some written instructions to schools. These written instructions included some general guidelines on how to provide distance learning for children on all levels, but also we had some special guidelines provided for special educational needs students, schools of also specialized schools that provide education for only special needs children, but also guidelines for inclusive schools that provide inclusive education for children with special educational needs. So these guidelines were provided for every single school in Serbia. Also, special guidelines were provided for local self-governments, which are in charge of the so-called intersectoral committees, which are in charge of diagnosing special educational needs and providing some input for individual educational plans. Also a list of online tools, a very rich list, I have to admit, of online tools, platforms, apps, and links were provided for schools that can be used for free for education on all levels and education for every child, not depending on needs, special needs, but generally in education as well. And what's maybe interesting for the participants of this forum, also special guidelines for teachers were given regarding prevention and treatment of digital violence and discrimination, which was very important in this period of time. We also had some questionnaire provided for all schools to see the coverage with distance learning of every student, with a special emphasis with vulnerable children or vulnerable groups of children, which are special educational needs children as well. And we got some very interesting data because about 95% of the schools were covered with this questionnaire. So we got data regarding over 700,000 pupils, and we have gotten the data that 96% of special educational needs children were covered by distance learning, which we think is quite a good coverage. 76% follow the TV classes and online classes, and only about 20% covered Viber communication or messenger communication. So all in all, about 4% of the children were not covered with education whatsoever, formal education in this period of time. I would like to share with you some of the experiences that we had with UNICEF, which is one of the greatest partners that we have. UNICEF provided Camtasia software for recording classes, and they also provided us with speech to text software, so the classes that were recorded can be captioned, and children with hearing impairment can also, like this, follow the online classes. And also with the Learning initiative, we had several meetings with teachers where it was a very good opportunity for teachers for peer learning and sharing their experiences on the work with special needs children during this time. In September, we went back to the schools. We opened the schools, and that meant some kind of a hybrid way of teaching, because depending on what or how the parents decided, their children could go back to regular classes, or they could choose to continue online schooling as well. And when we take into consideration children with developmental disabilities or other special educational needs, we see that all the rules that were required when going back to school, like wearing a face mask or physical distancing or sanitizing hands and learning surfaces more often than usually were an extra burden for some of them. And we saw that, for example, some children with the autism spectrum or other sensory issues. They were not feeling comfortable with wearing face masks, so we had to issue some other guidelines for their schools on how to still make it safe, safe environment for their health, besides giving the opportunity to have good education. And also we have seen that some fairly large number of special needs children have some chronic illnesses which make them especially vulnerable for the COVID disease. So their parents chose not to send them to schools, but rather have the online distance learning classes. And I would like to refer back to what our young participants just previously said, that even though digital learning gives us some marvelous opportunities to connect on a broader level, on a larger level with more people, but at the same time, it gives us some other challenges and some other difficulties like depression because of the lockdown and such. So all in all, when we talk about lessons learned, maybe what we need to consider is still working on digital competencies of the teachers, and also working on competencies of teachers on how to provide support to young learners with special educational needs in an online environment. So all in all, if I would like to take back just one idea from this conference as someone who works at the ministry on the policy level, then I would still go back to what Laura said at the beginning, to talk with them about them. When we considered the questionnaires, we only talked to teachers and asked about their experiences during the COVID crisis. So maybe this is one of the most important ideas for me to take back and include asking the children as well. But what we have all learned from this COVID experience is that vulnerable children or vulnerable groups are even more vulnerable in a global crisis like this. Thank you very much.
Maria, thank you so much for those wise words, and that's great. I think that you're able to take that back and sort of try and harness the voice of young people as well. And I think you mentioned there, you know, about the importance of teachers, and there's been a conversation going on in the chat that you probably weren't able to see as you were talking, where people were saying, you know, there's a lot of tools that actually exist, but you know, we need to sort of make people aware that they're there, and also the didactics to be able to use them are really important as well. So clearly there's lots of good things happening, but there's an awful lot more that we have to do as well. So thank you for that. If we move on to the next bit, we're going to hear from young people again. And we're going to hear a little bit about some of the, you know, risks and challenges that perhaps they experience, they're aware of, that they see online. And we're going to hear from Alessandro first, who's going to talk a little bit about, you know, the way that people try and present themselves online. But I'll give the floor to him.
Penso che le persone che tendono a mostrare un'immagine positiva della loro immagine, o che cercano di convincersi di avere una vita solare e piena d'emozione, è normale, proprio perché grazie ad internet c'è finalmente la conferma di avere la possibilità di avere contatti con le persone, e le persone, nel cercare di avere un'immagine positiva, cercano un contatto, ed è assolutamente normale. Ma bisogna renderci conto che fino a un certo punto non possiamo fingere di avere delle emozioni che hanno bisogno di essere espresse in un modo più chiaro, e non ci sono mai state persone che hanno veramente educato queste persone nel esprimere le emozioni, e spero che questa cosa cambi nel corso del tempo e che le persone si rendano conto che le emozioni sono molto più importanti di qualsiasi altra fonte di intrattenimento su internet.
I've watched that video of Alessandro's a lot of times now, and I think that there's a really powerful message that he's getting across, that we all know that, you know, that the online world, it's the polished, edited highlights of somebody's life. You know, the stuff we post to Facebook is the things we want everybody else to see. But I think there is a real concern that perhaps, you know, some people, it's not just young people, it's definitely not just young people with disabilities, but that some people feel that they can't express, you know, the way they're feeling to another person face to face, and that they use an online way of doing that. And I think that there's merit in that, absolutely. But I think it's important to have a balance between the two. And I'm now going to give the word to Sunna and Aldis again from Iceland, who again will just talk about some of the challenges perhaps that they see.
Ég held ekki. Nei. Það erfitt að vera fatlaður á netinu, sérstaklega þegar fólk reynir að notfæra sér þig eða notfærir sér það og sért fatlaður á eitthvað hátt. Sérstaklega það andleg fatlun eða svoleiðis fatlanir. Og svo líka gert brosalega mikið lítið úr fólki á netinu. Þannig ég held að það sé mjög mikilvægt að hjálpa fötluðu fólki sérstaklega á netinu, en öllu fólki almennt auðvitað.
Quite a difficult picture in some senses. You know, it's difficult to be disabled online. People take advantage of you. She talks about, you know, feeling humiliated, and in another video she talked about people belittling you because of, you know, your disability. I think, you know, that's something that's very sobering for us all to hear. And I'm going to pass across to Eike Vermeer in a moment from Liberty Global. And in their annual report, they actually talked about the fact that people have been historically disadvantaged by society. And I think Liberty Global have done quite a lot of interesting work in this space to try and sort of improve accessibility and inclusion. And I'd like to give the floor to Eike now to talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you, Carl. I think I can't start my video. Oh, hi. Thank you very much, Carl. Hi, everyone. It's such an honor to be here today, to be amongst such inspiring people, especially that younger generation represented here on a topic that's really important. I'm Eike Vermeer. I'm from the Netherlands. I work for a company called Liberty Global. Liberty Global is an internet provider. We own and co-own cable companies and mobile operations in 7 countries in Europe, and we have over 23 million customers. We're active in Switzerland, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, and Slovakia. At Liberty Global, I'm responsible for public affairs, and I'm actively involved in the digital inclusion programs and activities within our corporate responsibility department. As an internet provider, we believe the digital world needs to be available for everyone and allow everybody to make use of all the greatness the digital world has to offer. The main driver behind our corporate responsibility work is that we want to promote the concept that digital technology can be used for social good. How do we do this? Apart from being a long time partner of the Coalition around Safer Internet for Children and a proud member of the European Commission's Alliance for Better to better protect the minors online, we've also developed our own programs, some very successful programs, and it's something we call Digital Imagination. Within Digital Imagination, we focus on education and awareness and advancement of new technologies for the purpose of creating a better world. Within this program, we have our own projects, and one of is called Future Makers. With Future Makers, we want to create exciting ways to share the skills needed to function and thrive in the digital world and create positive social impact, especially amongst young children. Every year we hold Future Maker Awards. Here we challenge children to use their coding powers to make changes in their own communities, including those with disabilities. I think it's important to know that the people that take part of these awards are all young people who see a problem in their own environment and by using technology develop a solution. And the examples are actually truly amazing. One example is sensor glasses for the blind. A young boy, Timothy from Ireland, won one of our awards by designing sensory glasses that detect objects for blind people. Timothy realized the problem that blind people have is when they encountered ordinary obstacles while walking in public spaces. Obstacles such as ladders, signage boards, and wing mirrors from large vehicles. Blind people have no way of knowing that they're approaching such obstacles, and these glasses help detect it. Another example is a game developed for people with Down syndrome. Julia, an Italian teenager, 12-year-old coder, created a video that his friend's sister with Down syndrome could play along. I mean, this is another great example. And the last example I want to share about a future Makes Award is an app for people with hearing loss. Roland, a young coder from Hungary, developed an app that shows people how to use sign language so they can interact directly with people who have hearing loss. I think the beauty of all these ideas is they have been invented by children, and that they notice the need for such development in their own social environments, and they use coding to come up with a solution and really make a difference. And we're really proud to be able to help these developments with our knowledge and the tools and funding. Last thing I wanted to share is our Think Big program that we've developed in Poland. Here we partner with local government and other companies, and the mission of Think Big is by helping small entrepreneurs grow big by unleashing the potential of digital solutions for businesses, communities, and individuals. 2020 is already our 7th edition of the program, and we give out awards every year and funding to the winner. This year we had 130 entrepreneurs who applied to take part of this. And since 2019, we also have our Think Social Awards category. There's a real trend in the development of ideas and solutions around helping children with disabilities. Although we don't know who won this year's award yet, because the winners will be announced early December, it's amazing to see that all 3 semi-finalists have focused on helping people with disabilities. The final projects are a project supporting autism in the IT sector, an app that develops blind people navigate buildings and public spaces, and a mobile assistant for visually impaired people. These are just a few examples of how Liberty actively involves young people themselves in the definition. Oh, sorry, I think I've just been unmuted.
Sorry, we just missed the last bit, Eike.
Oh, I just wanted to say these are some examples of how Liberty actively supports young people themselves in the definition and execution of these programs. And we believe the digital world needs to be available for everyone in these, and these programs often provide very practical solutions and are crucial to making everybody get access to this digital world. Thank you.
Eike, thank you so much. Thank you for sticking to time as well, because everybody can see that we've reached sort of midday, and we're going to keep going for a few minutes, but I really appreciated you packing so much into that. And, you know, you've talked about so many things there. I said at the beginning that Liberty Global is doing a lot, and they clearly are. I think colleagues would be really interested to be able to follow some of those developments, Eike. And I guess one of the challenges for all of us is how we sort of raise awareness and get people to know that these things exist. You know, the app that you talked about, the sensory glasses. So perhaps you'd be able to share some links with us afterwards as well that we
could.
Absolutely.
If people can always reach out to me through LinkedIn or my email address. I don't know if that's possible, but I'm on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me, and then we can partner. We can see how we can work together. So yes.
Thank you so much, Eike. No, that's brilliant. So as I say, colleagues, I know that we are tight on time, but we're almost there now. And I want to pass now to Inga Bjarnadottir, who's a disability specialist from Iceland. And Inga was so helpful in helping us to hear the voices of Suna and Aldis. But she also works at the Icelandic National Association of Intellectual Disabilities. And I'd like to pass the floor to you, Inga. Thank you.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. And I want to thank my co-panelists for their great insights. Like Carl said, I work for Throskahjálp, the National Association of Intellectual Disabilities. And Aldís and Sunna are on our youth platform that is a very active and a great group that we have that support us in our work, but also have their own platform to work on their issues. Just to begin, and I'll try to make this as short as I can since we're running out of time, but these issues relating to digital rights and safety that arrived to our organization, people coming to us, have accelerated, and mostly from families and staff working in supported living facilities and personal spokespersons that are again and again facing barriers with the government on all levels. And this is partly because the Icelandic government has been taking large steps in the progression of digital administration and service. So, for example, people can get their driver's license on their phone, use it be able to access all governmental forms in one place. These are all positive things for the general public. But I, as a disabled person, I use a wheelchair, and I'm a disability expert for an organization that focuses on people with intellectual disabilities and disabled children. I often get the feeling that this journey is more about saving money and making things easier for the government than it is about making the lives of citizens easier. We feel that when a door opens, another one is closed. For example, in some neighborhoods in our capital area, you are now required to book a doctor's appointment via the internal web. So you can't make a phone call or show up at the doctor's office to make an appointment. You have to do it on the internet. And you have to have an electronic ID to do that. And the attitude seems to me that the administration staff in the government thinks that the generation that has a hard time adjusting to this new reality, this technical age, that they will be followed by a new generation that will by default be more tech savvy. So, but however, the reality is, as we know, that there will always be a group of people, a large group of people that will not be able to grasp these skills that are needed to use the technology as it is now. And this can be due to illnesses, aging, and accidents. So even though we have the skills to use technology now, we might be in a situation later in life where we can't use the same things that we are used to. But when this technical progression is done properly and with disabled people and their organizations leading the way, this has great possibilities, as we've heard today, like getting all the information and forms that you need on one website, so you don't have to go to many institutional websites finding different forms, using video chat to talk to your social worker or your doctor, and using virtual assistants like we've heard earlier today to ask when the next bus leaves or whatever. So, but the thing in Iceland is that we're such a small country that until a few weeks ago, you could not speak Icelandic to your phone, and you still it's still difficult to do so. So people with intellectual disabilities in Iceland are not able to use this virtual assistants like people in other countries. But of course, the hope is that the technology will advance and that it will be a huge support in the future for disabled people. But I want to get a bit into the electronic IDs and IDs in Iceland that are actually becoming vital for all citizens. This is like you have it on your smartphone, and you have to use a PIN code that only you know to access almost all internal websites in Iceland, and it's becoming more and more important. You needed to get information from your healthcare providers. When you get tests done, you will get the results on an internal web. To sign forms at the bank, they will send you confirmation to your phone. And just yesterday, it was announced that the government will stop sending regular mail, and you can only access announcement and other letters from the government online. And this, as all of you probably realize, is not good for many people with disabilities. And as far as we know, the organizations of disabled people were not consulted. So now we have a huge work to do unwinding this decision. And yes, for many disabled people, this is a great solution, these electric IDs, but just signing a form to get one is impossible for many people. Taking up a pen and showing your ID just to get the electronic ID is impossible. And their personal spokesperson, who has many legal rights in Iceland has no rights to ask for this electronic ID or to connect theirs to the person that they're assisting. So the legal framework is very behind on all these matters, all these digital matters. Disabled people, their families, personal spokespeoples, assistants and other people assisting disabled people are having a really hard time just doing regular day-to-day tasks, like going to the bank, applying for basic rights, and so on. So this leads to companies having the rules left and right just to get things done. So we feel that there's a lot of chaos going on because the rules are not there or very strict because they have not been updated to this new reality. So people are bending the rules, and this creates a risk and vulnerability for disabled people regarding their privacy and their rights. And the only legal thing to do in this circumstances is to take away people's rights, to deprive them of their autonomy. One of the most serious things that you can do to a person is take away their right to make their own decisions and be a full citizen. So part of the problem here is that the legal work is not being updated as a new reality arises. So we need this technology to be more accessible, to be more affordable, and we need legal system that is protecting disabled people and their rights and their privacy. And lastly, we need more learning platforms in Iceland, at least for disabled people, to learn how to use this technology to their advantage, because of course guidelines in English or YouTube videos in English are of no help if you have intellectual disabilities and do not speak English. So we need to have a better, we need to take better care of people that are trying to learn to use all these wonderful tools that we have. I think that's as far as I can get now, and I want to thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you so much, Inge, and I know we were tight on time, so thank you for sort of trying to be brief. I think you've brought us back down to earth, which I think is really important. So we're hearing about all of these amazing things that clearly exist, but actually, as you said, it's not always suitable, it's not always usable for everyone, so there is always more work that needs to be done. So thank you for that. We're going to try and sum up now, colleagues, and we have a couple of sort of very short interventions from young people, and I want to give almost the final word, but not quite, to Thomas from Austria, who is just going to sort of talk about how we can try and change things, how we can improve things. So Thomas, let's go to you.
When I had to stay at home during the lockdown, it was obviously a huge change. I missed all of my friends, and it was difficult because my family was at home all the day. But if I finished my homework quickly, I could do whatever I want for the rest of the day. I love to watch TikTok videos online or YouTube tutorials because I can learn a lot surfing the internet. I would like to end the following notes. Teachers could use digital devices even more, and it would be a good idea to flip their classes. Greets to all of you from the school center Ungarn.
So using digital devices even more, flipping the classes. And what we're going to do now in sort of closing, colleagues, I'm so grateful to everybody for their comments, their suggestions. There's been so much happening in the chat, which I hope people were able to look at. We'll capture that and we'll sort of share it in the sort of report that we publish. But I'd like to just go back to Laura, who started the session in such an inspirational way. And Laura, just to ask if you have any sort of final thoughts of things that you've heard, things that you've sort of captured, and then we're going to actually play a little video from João, which I think will round things off nicely. But Laura, let me go to you.
Thank you. I won't take long. I've had a lot of space and I've learned so much. I'm scribbling like crazy, all the ideas. We've done a very large study on COVID-19 with a lot of children with disabilities as well. So I was so interested to hear how that has impacted the children and young people who spoke. I loved the comment from Robin about we're all change makers now, because that echoed a lot with what the young people have told us in the other study. If they could get on the internet, if they had digital access, this has been a very positive thing for many children with disabilities, COVID-19. It's shown what's possible. It's shown what they can do. Things they were told they couldn't do they're now being allowed to do, and it's working for them. It's positive for many children, not just children with disabilities, but particularly positive for them. So that's that. And the other thing that stuck with me was Inga saying, which captures all of it for me, and you could see the whole morning. One door opens and one door closes. And I think that image just captures, I think, what is happening with a lot of children with disabilities, that we create technology and access to it, and then suddenly there's something else they can't get to, and we need to talk to them. I also loved Ika's work, that the very fact that Liberty Global is doing such exciting things with children themselves. So very inspiring, and thank you so much for letting me share in this.
Thank you, Laura. You've given such a good summary of everything that we've heard. I'm going to say a few words after we hear from João, but let's give the final word to João on his video.
Technology helps us to, I think, to be at the same level with the people that has no problems. So just try to understand that if you are not able to use it, it will be very difficult for you to do a lot of things.
I think they're really powerful words. You know, technology helps us to be at the same level with people who have no problems. We must try to understand that if you're not able to use it, it will be very difficult for you to do a lot of things. You know, we're out of time, colleagues. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Laura for such an inspiring keynote, to all of the panelists for sharing their wisdom, their knowledge, their expertise, and in particular to Daniela, to João, and to the young people that we heard from in the videos for sharing their experiences and giving us just a glimpse, you know, into what life is like online for them. I think we've had a huge amount of food for thought. It would be really great while I'm talking here if all of you would be able to perhaps type one sentence into the chat to tell us what you're going to do now as a result of what you've heard this morning. And we'll capture all of this and we'll include it in the report that will be published following the Safer Internet Forum. So just one sentence that will tell us what you plan to do as a result of what you've heard this morning. Please do that while I carry on just talking. So this isn't the end of the Safer Internet, of course, and for several years now, we've had deep dive sessions. This year is no different. We've got 3 deep dive sessions taking place, 1 this afternoon and 2 tomorrow, which actually means that you haven't got to choose. You can attend all of them if you want to. And we would like you to try and attend as many of these as you can. I'm just looking at some of these amazing comments. I'm going to try and add subtitles to the videos that we have on the Barnardo's website so it's more accessible to all. And, you know, I'm not suggesting that it's an easy thing to do, but it's a simple thing. And I think if we can all try and do something like that, it will make a huge difference. So, you know, this afternoon, the deep dive is going to focus on public and private solutions. We're going to hear from Lego. We're going to hear from Facebook about work that they've been doing to make platforms and products more accessible and inclusive. And we're going to hear about an amazing initiative, which some of you have probably heard of from Lego, called Braille Bricks. So please do try and join us for that. And then, as I already mentioned, tomorrow we're going to look at some of the online safety resources that have been created to help children and young people with diverse disabilities to stay safe online. Remember what Suna and Aldis said about not having any education. Thursday afternoon, we've got a session which will focus on inclusive education and the role that tech can play in facilitating that. And on Friday, as Khalil mentioned in his opening remarks, we've got 2 side events, one focusing on the fight against CSAM in the morning, absolutely crucial to talk about that, and the BIC policy session in the afternoon. So we hope that you'll be able to join us. So I want to finish by reminding you of something that Laura said. She said that we need to involve children and young people with disabilities in decisions that affect them, and that if we are in doubt about how to involve them, let's start by asking them for advice. So I'm going to leave you with the words from Suna that some of you saw at the very, very beginning. And she actually echoed some of the things that were said by the youth panelists yesterday who talked about tolerance and they talked about empathy. She said, I think we need more tolerance, and I think we need to educate people and to teach people how they should treat us as human beings. So thank you all so much for your contributions this morning. My apologies for running over time. Those of you who know me know that I'm not very good at sticking to time, but I hope it hasn't inconvenienced any of you too much. And I hope that we'll see some of you back here at 2 o'clock Central European time for the first deep dive. But thanks to everybody, and especially thanks to the young people.